But that brings up a very interesting question. Logic is potentially obvious in your sense, that is, that each valid formula can be, a valid statement can be seen to be valid by means of starting from obvious steps, by means of obvious, yes. Starting from obvious premises by means of obvious steps. But what about the invalid ones? Logic doesn't have, there's no procedure for showing invalid formulas to be invalid. Why the emphasis on showing the valid ones to be valid? Why stress valid rather than invalid?
Why? Well, now, just consider what the most basic uses of logic are. The basic use, I think, is a deduction of consequences. And this is on the positive side, and this is the thing that admits of the, that is potentially obvious. There's the basic utility of it. Finding here, you make some discoveries. You want to broaden your knowledge. You draw the logical consequences. In the case of invalidity, it doesn't even pay off as well, because if you show that the deduction of something from some premises is invalid, you still haven't shown it's false.
Certainly not.
But if you show that the deduction is valid, then you show that it's true. Having in both cases assumed that the starting point was true. Another trait of logic is that I think that in my this isn't a trait exclusively of logic, but in the narrow or the obvious sense of analyticity that I suggested in terms of reference, logic is emphatically analytic. When someone makes an obvious logical fallacy at the elementary level, where it can't be attributed merely to the complexity of the formula, we put it down directly. If he's being serious, we put it down to his not having learned the language adequately. He doesn't know how to use and, or he doesn't know how to use or properly. There's just no separating the two. And so this seems to me as analyticity par excellence. And that's not at all the case when you get up into higher realms in set theory.
I wonder whether the criterion or the diagnostic of obviousness doesn't include too much within the domain of logic. I suppose it's obvious that all flesh decays.
No, that this is black.
Or that this is black.
Yes,
but we wouldn't want to include these within the domain of logic. But then when you give some further criterion to sort out the right sort of obvious from the obviousness from the wrong sort of obviousness, one just wonders what sorts of resources are going to be used there.
Yes. Now, certainly obviousness is not a sufficient condition for being logical. Right. Obviously, there have been black dogs, whether there are now or not. That's an example I've used for that purpose. No, obviousness, potential obviousness is, however, a trait that that logic, in what I think of as the proper narrow sense, enjoys, and set theory does not. And so that's part of my reason for the cleavage between the two.
Right. Is there anything more that you can say by way of moving us towards necessary and sufficient conditions for falling within the domain of logic?
No. No, I don't think I've been able to do more there than what amounts to enumeration. I remember Tarski raising the same question. I think maybe he had a wider domain than logic in my narrow sense in mind, but either way, he gave up on it too. You specify logic for your purposes by the logical truths, by embracing all those sentences that contain terms of just this vocabulary, essentially, and you enumerate the vocabulary.